When the season first started, tell me, did anyone see this coming as far as TCU, ending up playing in the Big 12 title game, ended up being a one-loss, conference champion? Like, was anyone forecasting this when the season first started?
Look, the most unrealistic purple rose-colored glass TCU fans I know were saying, man, the ceiling for this team is probably 10 wins. If they touch that, we'd all be ecstatic in Sonny Dykes' first year. Most people were kind of hoping for 6-6, 7-5, get to and win a bowl game, build on some positive momentum. But I think that until maybe that Oklahoma game, many people didn't have high expectations. And then even after that kind of beat down of the Sooners, it still was like, well, this is all nice and good, but at some point the bottom's going to drop out. The TC's going to hit its ceiling. There's no way that this team can keep playing like this with these heart attack finishes and win. And yet here we are in the middle of December prepping for a college football playoff game because despite the fact that nobody really thought that this was going to happen, TCU just kept winning big games in an impressive fashion.
Absolutely. And I think it's interesting the parallel between TCU this year and Michigan last year, where, I think when the season first started, there were a lot of fans who were optimistic of what the team could be. But I mean, from being on this channel week in and week out, I'm not sure there were many people who were saying Michigan is going to be in the college football playoff, win the Big Ten, etc. So definitely a lot of parallels there with TCU and Michigan team from last year.
For sure. And I think it's so interesting because you look at Michigan going into that 2021 season and everything was about, Jim Harbaugh can't win the game. He can't get Michigan to the Big Ten championship. That, they can't kind of get over that hump. Whereas TCU, was kind of feeling that way with Gary Patterson. It had kind of reached its stopping point. And I think if Harbaugh hadn't gotten Michigan to the playoffs last year, maybe you're looking at a first-year head coach this year. But he was able to get that monkey off his back. Sonny Dykes was able to get the November monkey off of his back because everything written about him has been he can't win once the season things get tough. And he was able to go 4-0 in that month and, get TCU within 6 inches of potentially winning a Big 12 championship too. So, yeah, I think a lot of the way that these programs are looked at, Michigan's, obviously a much bigger brand name and a blue blood program, but what people were expecting of these two teams going into 2021 for the Wolverines and going into 2022 for TCU weren't that much different. But the way that they kind of overachieved and the character of the players within their program, the coaches within their program seems to be pretty similar.
Absolutely. So take us back to even the beginning of the season? Obviously, we talked about the expectations, but even the quarterback who was named at that time as the starter in QB1 is not the Heisman Trophy finalist who is in New York with Max Duggan. So can you kind of tell us about that with Chandler Morris and now Max Duggan?
I mean, I feel like, a lot of people that follow college football probably know the Max Duggan story at this point, but I don't really think you can tell it enough. Not only was he not the starter coming into this season, but he was, a kid as a freshman who an NFL talent scout said was the worst Power 5 quarterback he'd ever seen as they were evaluating Jalen Rager. That, his sophomore year, he almost lost the ability to play because of a 9-hour heart surgery that he had. Last year, he played on a broken foot through most of the season, after coming back from that surgery. I mean, there were so many things that said that Max Duggan should not be a starting quarterback at TCU. And then he wasn't a starting quarterback at TCU. But for a freak injury to Chandler Morris, maybe he never sees the field this game except in mop-up duty. And so there's not a person who watches TCU football in this world that doesn't love Max Duggan and hasn't loved him. There were a lot of people that doubted that he could be the type of quarterback to take TCU to the Big 12 championship, to the college football playoffs, to a meaningful football game, in December and January. And so I think universally among the TCU fan base, among the TCU community, nobody is happier that it's Max that's getting to do this, that it was Max Duggan in New York City, that it's Max Duggan as Big 12 Offensive Player of the Year, as an All-American, as all of these things, because everything that he stands for and that he represents is so perfectly TCU, and that kid legitimately bleeds purple. And so I give a ton of credit to him, for sticking with it, and the transfer portal and the NIL era. He could have gone a lot of places and played right away. And I don't think anybody would have begrudged him for doing so. But to see him have success at this level and to do it at TCU because he wanted to stay at TCU, I think is is one of the great bows on the story of this college football season.
Nice. Okay. So kind of talking about the expectations, could he get TCU to the college football playoff? I know there was just a lot of talk on social media about what if TCU doesn't win? Would they potentially be out? To me, I was someone who actually thought it was a bit ridiculous, but I thought there was some validity to it that, if TCU did not win that game, that potentially they could be out. Now, like I said, I thought it was pretty crazy. But what is that the feel that you got from other TCU fans of, losing that game, overtime game, and it was a close game, but was there some concern with the TCU fans of potentially not getting there?
Well, I'll tell you this much. To anybody that was around and was following TCU football in 2014, that saw TCU go into the final weekend, ranked number 3 with Ohio State sitting there at number 5, was terrified of what was going to happen on Saturday and leading into Sunday. And I think the PTSD of that had people thinking, man, if TCU doesn't handle business here, then yeah, they could find themselves on the outside looking in once again. I think that as the game kind of developed and as you started to see, this was probably going to be a close game, and into the fourth quarter, like this is probably going to be a kind of an instant classic type feel to it. I think the confidence level rose significantly. And then watching Max Duggan in tears on the podium, TCU had taken care of business so many times that season, getting to 12-0. And then you have a quarterback who's a great story. You have a lot of eyeballs. I mean, the Horned Frogs were the 9th most watched team in college football this past season, despite the fact that other than Notre Dame, they were the smallest university on that list and had far and away the smallest living alumni base too. So I think that this was a story that people were kind of enraptured by and enjoyed watching. And the players, the coaching staff, the way that TCU won games, all kind of kept them in that national consciousness. And so I felt a lot better by the end of that game. But honestly, until I was watching the college football selection show, sitting at the gate and the terminal at DFW, bawling my eyes out as TCU was announced, that was legitimately the first time that I fully believed TCU was going to the college football playoffs. I will say that it felt like down the stretch, like once TCU kind of made that comeback, it felt a little bit like, they were playing for overtime, and I think they had to because of Duggan's health at that point. But also, you got the feeling that they were playing it safe, and they were playing to lose well as opposed to win to some degree. And I think there were a lot of factors going into that. But it felt like the coaching staff was pretty confident, too. As long as this thing was close, they were getting into the playoffs.
The USC loss on Friday night obviously didn't hurt.
No, that helped. Thank you. Fight on.
Yeah, ease the anxiety a little bit. What I was impressed with in regards to the reaction to the Big 12 championship game was even after the playoff berth was announced and secured, I saw Max Duggan respond like this. I saw a few other players, one on the selection show itself, just respond instead of embracing, and I'm sure that came a little bit later, but they were still back in the moment of, we wanted to go undefeated. We wanted to win the Big 12 championship. We were like laser focused on that, and that meant everything to us. And we are still kind of down about that.
Oh, yeah. This is, it's interesting because I was talking to Aaron McMahon, who covers Michigan Wolverines for MLive, and he talked about how last year, Michigan's first time in the college football playoffs, there was a sense of just kind of happy to be there. And they were so excited to get to that point. They'd won the Big Ten championship. They'd beaten Ohio State. And so, like, getting to the playoffs, like, they already felt like they had accomplished their biggest goals. And so it's possible, if you really want to read into this, that TCU losing the Big 12 championship kind of kept that chip on their shoulder a little bit. And I don't think that this program would have not prepared properly or prepared well. And I don't think Michigan didn't prepare well last year either. I think that but it does help for this team who has been doubted all season long, who's been told they're not good enough, who, when they were 12-0, had ESPN talking heads saying that even at 12-0 and a Power 5 champion, they wouldn't belong in the college football playoffs. To lose that game and then have all of those doubts resurface, and all you've heard since is, not from people who actually follow the sport, but from the fan bases, is that TCU is going to get waxed. They're going to get waxed. They've got no shot in this one. This is a terrible matchup. They can't win. I think that doubt really does fuel players, and a player like Max Duggan, who has been a chip on his shoulder kid his entire career, I think that will keep this program locked in. They're winning a lot of national accolades. They're getting a lot of awards. There's been a lot of individual accomplishments for these guys. And so it's really easy to get fat and happy on the banquet circuit, right? Like we see this every year. So I think that little fuel, that motivation, that unsatisfaction will give them just a little bit of an extra edge as they game prep and prepare for Michigan. And will that make a difference on the field? Who's to say? But it certainly doesn't hurt if you're a TCU fan.
Do you buy into the stereotype that Michigan can push them around?
So I do believe this. I think that Michigan is a much stronger, more physical team in the trenches on both sides of the ball. I think that's inarguable. If you follow the game, if you watch Michigan play, they're bigger. I don't know if they're stronger, but pound for pound, it might be even, but they're just bigger dudes. They're still going to be stronger in that regard. And the way that they play football, the way that Jim Harbaugh wants to play football is he's going to own those trenches. TCU, remember, returned 82% of their production on both sides of the ball. These are all guys that have been around and been part of unsuccessful teams too, that have struggled with rushing the passer, that have struggled with stopping the run. And so I think that Sonny Dykes and his staff have done an incredible job improving this unit, but these are the same guys. So yeah, I think Michigan has a significant advantage. And so what I'm going to be really interested to see is when TCU is on offense, how do Garrett Riley and Sonny Dykes scheme up a way to get the ball out of Max Duggan's hands quickly, to use the speed advantage that they have on the outside. And I do think, Quentin Johnston is kind of a cheat code, and the Michigan secondary has been really, really good, but I think you can make some plays there. I think that the linebacking depth in Michigan is a little bit suspect. And so potentially if you can get guys in the middle of the field, if you can use Darius Davis, if you can use Jared Wiley, there's an opportunity to eat up some yardage at least. So I think that TCU can move the ball between the 20s, despite the fact that Max Duggan's going to be under incredible pressure all game long. Where you're going to see that real test is going to be inside the red zone, where I think that trench warfare really does make the biggest difference. And so I think if they can score on some long touchdowns, we've seen them with these big explosive plays, that's going to be their best opportunity to avoid that disadvantage. But if they're going to have to score in tight spaces, that's going to be a problem for them on offense. Defensively, this reminds me so much of the Rose Bowl. You come in with a Wisconsin team then that could have pounded it down TCU's throat. And they tried to get a little bit cute, and they didn't utilize that advantage. And they ended up losing the game, I think, because they relied on the passing game too much. And so I think Jim Harbaugh probably won't do that, because I don't think his team is built to do that. But yeah, it's going to be a real challenge for TCU to stop the run. The one thing that I've seen that defensive line, that linebacking unit do, I mean, they played, Bijan Robinson, and when they schemed to stop the run and they made it a passing game, they did an exceptional job. I don't know if they can do that against Michigan, because Michigan's offensive line is much better than Texas's is, but I think that we'll see them really try to take that away and try to put the game in J.J. McCarthy's hands as much as possible to kind of mitigate that disadvantage as well that they face.
Okay, perfect. We will bring on my partner, Dre. But Melissa, so another question. Obviously, we saw Max Duggan was, limping towards the end of that game. Are there going to be any questions or anything with his health come New Year's Eve?
I think TCU has not had a bye week since week 3. And so this team played 9 straight regular season Big 12 games, and then they played a Big 12 championship in the 10th straight week against a very, very physical Kansas State team. Max Duggan has been banged up. Johnny Hodges didn't play in the Big 12 championship. Dee Winters was coming off the injury. Quentin Johnston hasn't been healthy really since, I think, the first Kansas State game. And so this time away is going to be an absolute miraculous thing for this program that hasn't had a chance to catch its breath or really game prep in any way, shape, or form. And so I think they really were limping to the finish line against Kansas State, and give Kansas State a ton of credit. That's not why TCU lost. Kansas State outplayed them. They outcoached them. I thought they had a brilliant game plan, and it's a very, very good football team that I'll put on record, I think, is going to take it to Alabama in the bowl game, by the way. But I think that having this break, getting everybody fully healthy is going to be it's going to give TCU just an opportunity to be in this game. And I think Max Duggan's health is going to be a big part of that too. Now that he's gotten award season a little bit behind him, he's already back in the gym. He was working out in the hotel room the day of the Heisman ceremony. I don't think you'll see this team kind of sitting back and waiting for things to come to them. And as they get healthy, they can practice a little bit harder. Sonny Dykes has had to shorten practices. He's had to push them back. I mean, he's had to do so many things to keep this team on its feet. And so getting a couple of days off and a chance to catch their breath, I think, will be a huge difference. A fresh TCU team is very, very fast and very, very physical. And so I think you'll get to see, hopefully, both of these teams with, obviously Blake Corum won't be there, but both these teams putting their best foot forward in most of the positions on the field.
On a side note, we could do a live stream with Des and with Melissa sizing up the Sugar Bowl matchup.
Man, like I hate that Kansas State team because I've had to see them play twice. They're really, really good. That's going to be a fun game. That might be one of the sneaky good games of the bowl season for sure.
It'll be an interesting one. We'll see. I still haven't heard much as far as any opt-outs with Alabama, so I'm not quite sure what's going to happen there. I don't know if it's just under wraps or whatever the case may be. But
it's the SEC. They don't care about it if it's not a game they want to care about, right? So when Kansas State waxes them by 2 touchdowns, they're gonna be like, well, it wasn't that important to us anyways. Plus, all the Alabama portal guys are transferring to TCU. So
I was gonna say JoJo Earl looks like he is crystal balled to TCU, and
Tommy Brockermeyer is the other one. He's a forward kid too. So yeah,
I'm wondering. I'm wondering if that's a package deal with his brother coming too. I'm praying that it's not, because
he's not in the portal yet. So that's going to be a really interesting thing. But yeah, the TCU makes the college football playoffs and Alabama doesn't. And Alabama players are in the portal to transfer to TCU. This is all like, I don't know what world we're in, the upside down. Like I don't know what to think.
We're in a parallel universe. Dre, how's it going, my friend?
Good. Looks like you guys have done pretty good breakdown here. I don't really have much to add to it. I mean, I've my interpretation of TCU has been their team that kind of had, they kind of had like the pixie dust, if you will, kind of like the Cinderella story. I don't think anybody in the state I don't live in Texas, but I doubt anybody in the state of Texas thought out of Texas A&M, Texas and TCU. Heck, even Texas Tech, that TCU would be the team that would be where they are today. And along the way, I think they played maybe 3 or 4 backup quarterbacks for teams. They definitely had to show some fortitude, and they played a lot of close games this year. And to their tips your hat to them, they've come out on the winning end of most of those games, pretty much all except for one actually. But you just for me, it's like, well, are they really ready for this level of play? Are they ready for this level of physicality? Do I think they can come out and shock the world? Absolutely they can. They're not here by accident. But at the end of the day, they also have a Heisman finalist, and a guy who's had a great story throughout his career. I think he lost his job at one point in TCU, and Max Duggan. He's had to persevere to get to this point, and I think all that matters. All that matters when you get, find yourself, against adversity and maybe against a slightly better team. But I'm just not sure if TCU is built for 60 minutes to go against a team like Michigan. From a style standpoint, I'm not saying that Michigan is talent to talent way better than TCU, but stylistically, can TCU match up with this type of team? Because what Michigan can do very well, and you've seen this against teams like Ohio State, it also has firepower. It also has, high caliber playmakers on the outside, like Quentin Johnson that, Ohio State has, Marvin Harrison Jr. It's that, can TCU deal with a team that keeps their offense off the field? Can they deal with a team that likes to control the TOP? Because a lot of times, Melissa, what I will say, especially if you watch Michigan throughout the year, they don't always start off very well. They're not the type of team that typically, hits the ground running and puts you down 21 zip by the end of the first quarter. That's pretty rare. A lot of times they kind of feel themselves out, and especially defensively, Jesse Minter is incredible with his second half adjustments. So I mean, there's a chance that TCU can have the lead 17-14 going at halftime. Wouldn't shock me, or be behind slightly, but can end up losing the game 35-17, or that's just the type of team Michigan is. They really are a second half team. I don't like that trend, but that's just been who they are. So I don't know. I mean, I think there is a path for TCU to win this football game, but I know I just kind of went on a rant here, but what I would like to ask you is, internally, is there a strong belief, from the TCU faithful that they really can get this done, or expect to get it done, rather?
I wouldn't say there's an expectation. I mean, I think we know we're playing the number 2 team in the country, that Michigan is very, very good. But I'll also say this, as someone who's been around TCU since 1997, I can't tell you how many times people from other conferences have come in and said, TCU can't hang with this style of play. You can ask Wisconsin how that went for them. You can ask Ole Miss how that went for them.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, like, yeah, I think Michigan is really, really good. I think Michigan's favored for a reason. I think the spread is what it is for a reason. I think that those are all valid. This is a very, very good Michigan team. But I'll tell you this much. I think that you can say people have a lot of misconceptions about what the Big 12 is today. And I think they think the Big 12 is all just kind of, fast offenses that can't stop anybody and they're just going to get run over. But when you look at the way that Texas has been built for the last couple of years, when you look at the defensive players I mean, there's 5 or 6 defensive linemen. They're going to go in the top 2 rounds of the NFL draft coming out of that conference over this past year. Tyree Wilson's going to be a top 10 pick at Texas Tech. There's a lot of talent on that side of the ball. And so, Michigan might be the most complete defensive team that they've seen in that regard. But, Dave Aranda's a really good defensive mind. I think there's just this won't be anything they haven't seen before. Whether they can stop it or not, that's going to be the real question. And I think Michigan will be well prepared to attack the weaknesses. And there certainly are many on TCU's defensive side of the ball. But I also think that you guys probably haven't seen, Big Ten probably hasn't have a pair of corners like Josh Newton and Travius Hodges Tomlinson, the Thorpe Award winner. I think that when you look at the speed that TCU has, I've heard TCU compared a little bit to Maryland, but it's like Maryland on steroids. Maryland is athletic. They've got a running quarterback. But I think TCU is as athletic but more skilled at every position across the board. And so, I think this is going to be a challenge for Michigan, and I think it's going to be a challenge for TCU. But I think that they'll rise to it. And I think the thing we know is that this TCU coaching staff is really, really good at what they do. They, too, are a second-half team. I mean, there's a reason they had all these close games and comebacks, and it was because they were trailing by 17, 18 points at the break in a couple of them. So this team is very resilient. They aren't scared of a challenge. They are a very physical team. They may not look the same as some of the physical programs up north, but I think that they will match that physicality the best that they can. Like I said, the trenches, that's going to be an advantage to Michigan on both sides of the ball. But I still fully expect TCU to put up a really great fight in this one, to be in this game. I don't think that they'd be playing in the college football playoffs if they weren't a truly talented team. And the thing that I'll argue to my death is I think this team can go and play with anybody. Will they win? It'd be really, really cool. Like it would be cool. Sure. It'd be a shock. I mean, that would be, I don't go in with any expectations other than I think that it's going to be a battle, and I think the Frogs are going to hang tough. And if both teams are healthy, then I think this thing will come down to the fourth quarter. I don't think the Frogs are going to get run off the field. Because the other thing, too, is you got a team that can control that likes to control the time of possession. You've got another team that likes to score in 2 minutes or less. So I think it could be Michigan might have an 11-minute drive that goes for 7, and TCU might have a minute and a half drive that goes for 7 too. And I think that's what's going to be a lot of fun for fans to watch. They're so contrasting in that way.
Nice. Well, if there is, so let's say, hypothetical that TCU does win the game. Do you feel that it has to look a certain way, or do you feel that TCU can win multiple ways, just kind of hypothetically speaking?
I think the way that TCU wins this game is pretty simple. They don't turn it over. They put the game on J.J. McCarthy's shoulders, and he does turn it over once or twice. I mean, he's been unbelievable this year, but he's been a little sloppy with the ball, especially in the quarterback run game. And he is a young guy. This is the biggest game that he's ever played in. Like I said the other day, though, I think that playing in front of a NFL stadium, in front of a bunch of corporate shills that have lots of money versus playing in the Horseshoe in front of 100,000 screaming fans, he's probably not going to be intimidated by the environment, would be my guess. But yeah, I mean, they're going to have to make him make mistakes. They're going to have to limit the explosive run plays. I think you're going to see Michigan break off a big run or two. And then they're going to have to score in explosive plays. I mean, if you can hit Quentin Johnston, Darius Davis once or twice over the top, if you can get a big run from Kende Miller, and if Max Duggan is able to be healthy enough to rush for over 100 yards, like that's the way they eke out a 3-point win. I don't think that they're going to be able to blow Michigan out, but I think if everything goes right and that pixie dust that you mentioned earlier, Dre, stays with them, then yeah, there's a path for them to win this game for sure. But it's going to have to be, they're not going to be able to make a lot of mistakes, and they're going to need Michigan to make one or two. The key to me, the one that I really want to watch, Darius Davis hasn't been healthy the last month of the season, and so he hasn't been as big of a factor in special teams. If he can get loose on a punt or a kick return, when he scores, TCU tends to play really, really well. And so that could also be one of the difference makers that we're watching for.
Okay, nice. One thing that I think is important is definitely that Michigan just doesn't overlook TCU, because I think it's one. I just think it's important that they just kind of bring their A game. Number one, because obviously it's college football, anything can happen, but also too, I think TCU is capable of winning a big game. So definitely want to make sure that, that the Michigan players and coaching staff is absolutely dialed in. Up until this point, they've played pretty clean. So you want to just keep that going, because if you do win the game, you'd love to be just firing on all cylinders going into the national championship.
No, I think, hey, overlook TCU. We aren't any good. We can't play. Big 12 soft. Yeah, let's keep that narrative going. I'm fine with it, because I don't think Michigan's going to be overlooked. And I think once you've gone to the playoffs and lost, if you get that time back around, it's a very different experience. And kind of akin to playing in the Super Bowl for the first year. Everything is a lot bigger, a lot longer. There's a lot more breaks. And so Michigan's going to have a significant advantage in that regard of having kind of been through this. It's hard to replicate that. So I think TCU will be as well prepared as possible, but Michigan absolutely has an advantage in that they just kind of know what to expect in a way you can't really replicate. So it's a lot of fun. I'm super excited to see the Horned Frogs on the stage. I love the momentum that it's building for the university in all regards. We saw how much winning the Rose Bowl changed the fortunes of TCU beyond just the athletics programs. And this is an opportunity, especially in the NIL era, to really capitalize on this national stage and having a really fun, a really likable football team that people have enjoyed watching. And to, hey, if you shock the world here, like, it's all gravy. I mean, it's all gravy at this point anyways. Like, this is so freaking cool. Like, I've been around this program a long time. I'm ecstatic to be there. I want to see them win. I believe they can. I know that the odds are going to be against them, but it's just a lot of fun to be in this position for sure.